Today is Tuesday. Tezayin Menachem of Tavshin Daled. We are into this Menachem Sefer Mamar Tavshin Yud Aleph Tavshin Yud Beis. In the Mamar of Shavuos Tavshin Yud Beis, second day of Shavuos Tavshin Yud Beis, Shehikdimu, and we are on page Shin Ches. The Rebbe is discussing, following on from our summary yesterday, Seder Shavuos, the two types of divine energy that exists within Seder Shavuos, generally known as Igulim and Yosher. Igulim being the transcendental element of godliness within each realm, and Yosher being the immanent element within each realm. And the Igulim is Ein Sof, as it was before the Tzimtzum, before the first constriction, and it was transferred into Eilumis, into realms, through the Kav via the Tzimtzum. And therefore, despite the fact that it only passes through the Tzimtzum and doesn't take on the essential inner detailed aspects of the Tzimtzum, nevertheless, something of the Tzimtzum does affect it, to the extent that you have two sides to two aspects to this Hablik to this Igulim type of light once it passes through the Tzimtzum, which is the metaphor for that would be the upper waters and the lower waters. The water being denoting Igulim. Earth, Eretz, denotes Yosher, whereas water denotes Igulim. In Eretz you have fragmentation, a lot more fragmentation. On the earth you have a lot more obvious fragmentation than in the sea. So in the water, which is a representation of Igulim, you have the Maim Elyonim and the Maim Tachtonim. It says in Bereshis, Hashem separated between the upper waters and the lower waters. The upper waters being the Igulim element, where the most forceful dominant factor is the Ein Sof, the limitlessness of the Igulim. Whereas when we say the Maim Tachtonim, it's still Igulim, but you have his Gabrus Bechinas HaTzimtzum. What is more overbearing is the aspect of Tzimtzum, the experience of the Tzimtzum through which it passed through. And the Rebbe went on from that to explain that this also reflects in the creatures, as it were, that you find in the water. The metaphor for that would be angels, right? So you have creatures that live, quote, in Igulim, some creatures which are more distinctly, it's more distinctly obvious, the Ein Sof aspect within them. That would be Spheres, where some creatures, what was more distinct is the Tzimtzum aspect within them, which would be like angels. And here the Rebbe began to explain the difference between Spheres and angels. Spheres, says the Rebbe, quoting the Tikkun Zohar, which the Alter Rebbe explains at length in chapter 20 of Igeres HaKodesh. In Spheres, Ihu v'chayoy echad, Ihu v'garmay echad. Hashem and his oiros, vivifications, are one, and Hashem and his kelim are one. His causations are one, right? So, which means, the Rebbe says, not only as Spheres are in Atzilus, are they one with Elikus, but Spheres, as they are in Bria, are also one with Elikus. In other words, Spheres, in whatever realm they are, whether it's Atzilus or Bria, they are one with Elikus. Obviously different, right? Because a different level. But within that realm, the unity and the union between the Spheres and Elikus is one. Because in Sfiris what you have is the overbearing element from the Igulim dimension, the Ein Sof aspect within the Igulim dimension, as opposed to the Tzimtzum aspect. Therefore, as they manifest themselves as Sfiris, they are one with the Likus. What's more obvious is the Likus, the godliness that's within them. Whereas in Malachim, what do you see? What is a Malach? Despite the fact that a Malach is nullified to godliness, bottle, fulfills Hashem's missions and so on and so forth, he's a separate entity. He exists. Why? Because in a Malach what's expressed more is the Tzimtzum element within the Igulim. And therefore, what comes out from that is a Malach, like a separate entity. And from here the Rebbe goes in to the difference between angels and neshamas. We're top of page Shin Ches. Ukiyudua, the first line, in the middle of the line. Ukiyudua chiluk bein malachim leneshamas. As is known the difference between angels and souls, sheneshamas mehusam alakus. The difference is that souls, their essence is godliness. What are they? Godliness. It's not that the neshama has a separate identity that's bottled to godliness. The neshama is godliness. Also in Mamar, concerning which it says, "Neshama shenasata bi tahirahi v'chulu." The soul that you've given me, tahirahi, is pure, which means shegam b'ridas lamata. It means that even as it descends down lower, right, which is denoted in the next aspect, the next part of the brachos, right? Nevertheless, even as they come down below, milhusa he had vekas belakus. What is its very essence, its very being? It's cleaving to godliness. So what's the difference between a soul in Atzilus and a soul lower? A soul which at a lower level. It's just that the cleaving is in a concealed cleaving. So what does it mean? What's the difference between concealed cleaving and a malach that is a separate entity and bottled to lakus? What's the difference? So it says that to the extent that we find the neshamas agvois by high souls that are a very high level, that even as they are down here below, their entire being, their entire identity, even down here below, is godliness, right? As we learned in previous Mamarim, that there's the idea of neshamas of Atzilus, like Moshe Rabbeinu, that even down here below, they are just like they are above. K'moshe Amru, as our sages say, Rashbi said about himself, "Ana simana ba'alma." I am but just a sign. In other words, my entire identity is godliness. Okay, it's with similar expressions. Masha'enkin malachim. This is not the case concerning angels. Hem mitzias. They are a separate entity, a separate existence. They have their own identity. It's just that when the angel fulfills his mission, he is in a state of total nullification. To the extent that the angel says, "Binish baiti," I myself swear, referring really to whom? To Hashem. So he's in a state of complete bittul when the angel fulfills his shlichus. I'm sorry. Because his existence, his being, does not conceal on the godliness. This is even more so than we see this from the idea of mitzvahs, and even in a greater degree. What do we see concerning mitzvahs? For although the mitzvahs clothe themselves in physical matters, nevertheless, from the perspective of the clothing of the mitzvah, there is no concealment of the face within the mitzvah, within the physical aspect. In other words, so far as the mitzvah is concerned, the gashmis does not conceal upon the godliness of the mitzvah. We don't see it because we are limited. But so far as the mitzvah is concerned, it works hand in hand with the gashmis. The Sefer Torah becomes holy, the tefillin become holy, and so on and so forth. This is similar. This is also the case in Malachim, and even more so. Because despite the fact that they are a separate existence, they have a separate identity. Nonetheless, because of their fulfillment of their mission, their existence, their identity does not conceal on the godliness. So it's only because of their shlichus, the fulfillment of their mission, that they don't conceal on the godliness. But if on their own, they do exist. Why? They have their separate identity. It's because of the overbearing aspect of the tzimtzum element within igulim, in the lower level of igulim kanal as mentioned before. Let me try to sum this up. The difference between the Neshamas and Malachim, it says in Chassidus, stems from how they come into being. They both come into being through the union of the Sfiris. The difference is that Neshamas come from what's called the inner aspects of the Sfiris, whereas Malachim come from the external aspects of the Sfiris. It's like the difference between what Kabbalah says terms zivuk gufni and zivuk neshikin. A union, a bodily union, and a more external union. Just like in the union of a human being, a man and a woman, from the union of the man and woman, what comes out? A child. That's a neshama. The child is identical to the father and the mother. So an internal union produces something identical. An external union produces something removed, something secondary. So neshama is a human being. A human being. A child is born from the union of the parents. He's a human being. Yes, with all the elements that that the parents have. Could be different character, but in essence it's the same. And as the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, the unity, the connection between the child and the parents remains even after the child is born. As the Alter Rebbe explains,
but you give them trees, trees, and the trees are...
It's not identical from the seed.
The trees are identical
to the previous one.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Ein chanami. An angel is something different. A neshama, b'talmenu kidmuseinu, that we are the image of God. That's said about whom? About humans. And it's as it says in the Pasuk Eliyahu, it finds expression in the body, but it all stems from the soul. Now, how does that manifest itself in actuality? In actuality, it manifests itself, in other words, a neshama. I'm not talking about let's talk about the neshama l'mayla, the way it is above. The way the neshama comes down below, there are things that, the clothing of the body, the new state of consciousness, that sort of don't allow the neshama to reveal itself or to as it is above. But in essence, what is the soul? In what state is the soul? The soul is godliness. It's godliness b'bchinas yesh. So you have spheres of Atzilus, which is completely godless. It's godliness revealed. They exist in a state of bittul, total bittul. The neshama, I think the expression is used, elikus naas and nivra. It's godliness that becomes a created being, so to speak.
When you say the union, what do you mean the union of the spheres?
The zivuk. Zohar Malchus.
Zohar Malchus.
Depends which ones. Usually we talk about the Neshamas, we're talking about the union of Zohar Malchus.
Okay. Zohar Malchus when? For
in Atzilus. For Neshama.
In Atzilus.
Yeah. Or for Malachim. Malachim are also from Zivugim. But one is a Zivug Pnimi and one is a Zivug Chitzoni.
Right.
So the Neshama, the only difference between the Neshama and the elokus of it, as it were, before it comes into being, is that this is in a state of complete and total bittul, whereas the neshama becomes, if you want to call it, an avatar. But what is it? It's Getlachkeit. Malachim are already a created being. It's something different. Both of them are in a state of bittul, but where does the bittul come from? The bittul of the neshama is inherent. It's natural. It's what it is. The bittul of the malach is an addendum to it. So the malach will be totally bottled to getlichkeit when the malach fulfills his shlichus that Hashem puts upon him. So the bittul emanates from the fact that he has now a shlichus, and he accepts the shlichus, and he's bottled to likus. Whereas an neshama is inherently bottled. And that difference stems from the way they come into being. A neshama comes into being through the yichud pnimi, through the zivug pnimi, from the inner elements of the zivug. And it's like the difference between, take an oir and a keli. In the union of an oir and a keli, there's also pnimius and chitzonius. The pnimius oir unites with, fuses with the pnimius kli. The chitzonius oir fuses with what? With the chitzonius of the kli. What's the difference? The pnimius oir is not in a mode of revelation. It's just the fact, and the yichud between that and the kli is just the fact that the oir and the kli could fuse and combine. There's no gilui. Gilui comes from the external element. The external element of the kli, oir, but the external element of the oir and the external element of the kli. The inner elements, it's like when a person, the Rebbe Rashab brings the mashal, a person who has his eyes closed. He has the power to see, but he doesn't see. So in what way is there the koyach and the in the eye? They're just there, it fuses. The eye is a keli to be mekabel the koyach and the. The eye is a receptacle that is naturally attuned to receiving the power to see. That's the yichud pnimi, and that brings about a neshama. The yichud chitzeni brings about a malach. Both of them could be in a state of bittul, but in the neshama, the bittul is innate within its being, because that's what it's the yichud pnimi, right? So the clay is bottled to the air, and they're fused, dveikus. Whereas the malach is already secondary; it's something revealed from the yichud chitzeni. It could also be in a state of bittul when the shlichus is put upon the malach, and because of the overbearing presence of the godliness or Hashem that's causing him to fulfill the shlichus, that the malach is in a state of bittul, that he could say binish baiti. But the bittul is inherently different. This is a natural one. This is what it is, and this is as it were an added one.
Just to connect with what you're saying earlier.
So similarly, that's the difference that Rebbe says between Spheris and Malachim. It's to a greater extent. Because Spheris, what's Spheris Atzilus? Spheris of Atzilus. Spheris of Atzilus is the godliness as it was before Atzilus, just in a revealed state. In the Neshama, it already becomes in the form of Yesh, but it's still a Lakus. A Malach is already a Nivra. That's even, right? Well, what's a Sphira? A Sphira is godliness revealed. The essence Spheris Atzilus are the godliness as it was before Atzilus, just in a revealed state.
Which parallels the Malachim, parallels the angels, because it's revealed.
No,
So it's not a concealed state.
No, it doesn't parallel the Malachim. The way it would work is like this. Spheris, the highest state of bittul and godliness, Neshamis, and then Malachim. That is going to say that the Neshamis have the ability to rise even beyond the Spheris. That's the point he's going to try to drive at. The third keser, where you can draw down from the areas of Shalifnei Tzimtzum. Why? Because of the fact that the Shama comes down into the Guf and Lamat and so on and so forth, where you can reach even beyond. But in Atzilus, so to speak, or within the revealed consciousness, there's Spheris, Neshamas, and Malachim. Because the Neshamas come into being through what? Through the Yichud of the Spheris, through the unity of the Spheris. That's the point, in general terms, that Rebbe is trying to make here. I mean, it's a very, very big sugya. We can elaborate more. But in general terms, this is the point that Rebbe is trying to make.
It's going to be a question. If we're talking about Panemius and Chitzonius, in terms of the Kav and the eagle, which is Panemius and which is Chitzonius?
Well, over here he's talking all about Igulim. He's saying that within Igulim itself, you have the Panemius aspect and the Chitzonius aspect. Or the source of the Panemius aspect and the source of the Chitzonius aspect. Yeah, the Panemius and the Chitzonius. So you have, in other words, the Igulim, which are from Lifnei Tzimtzum, before the Tzimtzum, going through the Tzimtzum via the Kav, b'derech ma'aver, only in a transference, in a passing through mode, rather than how the kav goes through b'derech islapshus in a clothing mode, right? But despite the fact that it's b'derech ma'aver in a passing through mode, nevertheless, there's still a difference between the igulim as they are before they pass through the tzimtzum, and the igulim as they pass through the tzimtzum, even though they remain inherently the same. In what sense? In the sense that they've passed through the tzimtzum, without taking out the strappings, but passing through the tzimtzum nonetheless. And that passing through causes an added element in igulim, which it doesn't, a reduction, if you will, in the igulim that it doesn't have before. Before, all you had was igulim, transcendence, what he calls ein sof. Once it passes through the tzimtzum, the eagle, to a certain extent, realizes, as it were, that there is a phenomenon as a tzimtzum, as a void, as a makim panri. And therefore, what is developed is two sides to that coin. The ma'im el yonim and the ma'im tachtonim. The inner aspect of the igulim, which is the ein sof aspect of the igulim, and the outer aspect of the igulim. Again, this is the pnimis and the chitzonius, which is the precursor to the pnimis ha'er and the chitzonius ha'er, which is the precursor to spheres and malachim, or neshamas and malachim. So that's where you begin. But we're all talking about the igulim aspect, which is that still within that igulim aspect. Just two more lines. Chapter 7. This is all what we're talking about. Where we're talking about Ein Sof, where the tzimtzum, the contraction, did touch. Meaning what? We're talking about in the igulim, right? In what sense? That you have now the ma'im el the ma'im tachtonim, the inner and the outer. But in order to arrive to the infinite, Hashem's infinite light, where the tzimtzum didn't touch at all, which is what? Which is Hashem's infinite light, which is even beyond, before His will, Hashem's will to create the worlds has arisen. Why should I tzimtzum begins aliyah? When we talk about the tzimtzum, we talk about them in the sphere of Ein Sof, as it were, where Hashem already has a desire to create the worlds, right? Why? Because that's why the tzimtzum came into being, in order to create the world. But before, so to speak, Hashem had His desire to create the world. The tzimtzum doesn't touch there, because it's before the worlds are even contemplated. So in order to arrive to that level of Ein Sof, which is Bechinas Baal HaRatzon, the master of the will, this comes through the soul descending down here, below, to clothe itself into the animal soul, to refine it and to purify it, etc., as the Rebbe will explain at length in the next section of the Mamar.